A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. These are the words of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is one of, if not the most, important amendments that is part of our Bill of Rights. It is by which all of our other inalienable rights are guaranteed. It is the protection against threats to our freedoms and liberties, both foreign and domestic, and it is a necessity that our founding fathers recognized was important to benefit their new nation. The Second Amendment is one of the most important and discussed topics in recent politics over the last couple years, meaning that it is as important now as it was back when it was first incorporated into the Bill of Rights. The debate now, however, has changed from when it was first instituted, which is important to consider. When establishing the Second Amendment, the Founding Fathers had security in mind. One of their concerns was a standing army. They feared a standing army and believed that they were a hazard to liberty if kept during times of peace. This fact is echoed time and time again in the work of Robert E. Shalhope, Origins of the Second Amendment. To combat the need for a standing army, the Founding Fathers wanted its citizens to be armed and part of the militia should it be called upon. This meant that they could rise up in defense of the nation or even just their own property or lives without much government intervention. Fast forward to today's argument for the Second Amendment, and it's a little different. We have a standing army, as well as other institutions in place to keep us safe, such as the police. People that are against the Second Amendment often bring up these facts in suggesting why we no longer need to keep and bear arms. However, sometimes relying on the protection from others just isn't possible, especially when the situation occurs that only allow for split seconds that decide between life and death. It is in these situations that Second Amendment supporters claim that their rights guaranteed in the Second ensure their ability to defend themselves. The Founding Fathers were crafting this document on the tail end of a war for their independence that saw them win freedom from oppressive governing forces in England. These included both King George and Parliament. The Founders understood the need for negating tyranny by ensuring the citizens had a way to fight back if the government decided to be oppressive. Above this, though, was the Founders' belief that just the threat of a people being able to rise up would keep the ruling government in check and in service of its people. As Jefferson said, "What country can preserve its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms." When considering the complications of the Second Amendment, one need look no further than current events. It seems every couple months there's another mass shooting that has staunch gun control advocates calling for stricter gun laws, confiscation of guns, or a complete repeal of the Second Amendment. Two sides often rise up in this debate. One side, the gun control side, questions the need for weapons that are considered military-style weapons capable of mass destruction. The silliness of this particular stance in considering anything that most civilians can own being on par with military-grade weapons is laughable, but that also cuts into the other side of the argument. The opposition to this cry, the pro-amendment, freedom-loving crowd, claims that they should be able to own guns for various reasons, because it is their right to, for uses like hunting and sport, and to protect themselves from threats both foreign and domestic. Again, most of the weapons that even pro-Second Amendment citizens have can match the weapons that they would be facing should a tyrannical government be their opposition. But if I'm personally going against the military and you offer me a shotgun or an AR-15, a gun that is now under much scrutiny, I know which one I'm personally picking. There have obviously been many important court cases dealing with the Second Amendment. Some older ones, such as United States v. Cruikshank and Presser v. Illinois, occurred in the 1800s and found that the Second Amendment only limited the federal government. This meant that the states could still impose laws that affected gun ownership. In 1939, Supreme Court decided that two citizens should not own sawed-off shotguns because they were not part of a militia in United States v. Miller. In more recent years, we also have important rulings in regard to the Second Amendment. Two of these are District of Columbia v. Heller and McDonald v. City of Chicago. The 2008 Heller case ruled that it was constitutionally protected right to own a handgun in your home for self-defense. This was a U-turn in comparison with the Miller ruling. The McDonald case of 2010 was to determine whether the Second Amendment should be incorporated via the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause as a limit on state power, as Vernick and his colleagues note. This essentially placed the Second Amendment as a fundamental right and brought the state government's power in line with the federal government's in not being able to infringe on those rights. The Second Amendment debate is not going anywhere anytime soon. As long as there are tragedies that we see occur so often, there will be a call for stricter laws. And as long as there are law-abiding, responsible gun-owning Americans that believe in their Second Amendment rights, a defiance to those laws will always be present.